So on this episode, I'm going to speak to an expert, and the expert today is Lewis Moses. Lewis Moses is a former GB international runner. He's also the founder of New Levels Coaching and Runner Retreats. He coaches athletes at Loughborough University, expert coach with lots of athletes all around the UK, and he's going to give us some information on marathon running for you guys to take home. The expert today is the founder of New Levels Coaching, also a former international athlete and an expert running coach. So we've got some questions today about a variety of topics, but we're going to focus on initially the marathon, because that's topical right now. Everyone's either thinking about a marathon, they've seen a marathon on TV, or they're thinking of doing one in the future. So we're going to initially go into preparation for a marathon. What are some of the steps that people will take to prepare for a marathon?
Yeah, it's weird with a marathon. It's one of the events where you do actually have seasons. You know, you do have spring season, which is big marathon season right now. It's Manchester, Boston, London, you know, a lot of Rotterdam, Paris, loads of different marathons around the world. And then the autumn season, we tend to have big ones, like especially in America, you have Chicago, New York. Over in the UK, you have Chester, Yorkshire Marathon, and then in between that, there's a lot of different things going on. But the marathon season is quite unique. So when you talk about preparing, it's almost like seasonal preparation for a marathon. The new year, new me kicks in around January time, where people think, I've got a marathon coming up in April, which is generally when it falls, March, April time, May if it's something like Edinburgh, which Lucy from Run Through did last year. And then you think, okay, well, I'm going to focus on the marathon now, I'm going to get those preparations in place. But then for the autumn ones, it's a little bit different, because you may be doing some summer races, you may be doing 5Ks, 10Ks, but then all of a sudden your preparation has to shift. And I guess the key question is when does that preparation start?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what you're alluding to, isn't it?
Yeah, like when do you actually get that going? So obviously the April marathons have now finished, and then over the summertime, people who are preparing for, say, an October marathon or next year, what do they do in the meantime?
It's a really good question. So I always say you're always training for a marathon. You know, it's not just that you switch off and you're no longer training for a marathon, because I think it's really important to keep that consistent training in there, and it's really important to keep racing as well. So a lot of our marathon runners over the summer, they'll choose to go and focus on 5Ks and 10Ks. They might want to improve their speed, and I think that's a really good way to actually build on your marathon. So people who've maybe done a marathon and are maybe recovering from one now, it's really important to have that rest and recovery time. But then I think it's also important to get back to your training when you have rest and recovered, get back to racing, focus on maybe some of the shorter distances, or even something like trails, or people may even go longer. And then usually they say, you know, around about 16 weeks out from the marathon, you kind of want to go back to focusing on, okay, well, how's my training plan now going to become a little bit more specific towards the event that I'm doing? Because that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about making it then more specific to the event that you're going to do in the future.
So what are some of the specific things that people can do after they've done, like I say, an April marathon, to be able to recover quickly so they can go again for the summer races you just talked about?
The first thing they should do, which is the word every runner hates, is rest. I know people like streaks and they like a routine, and it's really important to have your own little routines, of course it is. But the first thing people should do is allow their body to rest, and not just their body, their mind as well. You know, they've been in a big training block, they've done that process through to the marathon and then executed that on the day itself, and that can be quite stressful. It can be really enjoyable, but it does take a lot out of you. So resting, things like getting into the swimming pool is really good, you know, non-impact activity.
Actual swimming?
Yeah, swimming. So, you know, why not go for a swim? Go for an aqua jog as well. I don't know if people have ever done that before. Some pools allow it, where you can put an aqua jogging belt around you, you can go in, and just that buoyancy of the water takes the pressure off the joints, the muscles, the tendons, everything that's been stressed during the marathon. So things like that, yoga, stretching, relaxation, all those things, if you want to keep active, we call it active recovery. Or instead of a run, why not go for a walk? You know, just to reduce that impact, make sure you're not stressing the body too much, and then have that nice rest and recovery period. I think that should last for like 1 to 2 weeks. You should build back up slowly and then start to get yourself back into your training.
So 1 to 2 weeks, active recovery,
yeah,
and then start thinking about the future.
Absolutely, yeah. So building back up, you know, I usually do like what I call a reintroduction week in the second week, give people optional running in there. But again, listen to the body, you know, it's really important to listen to how you feel. I as a coach, know what I know from the past and my own body, but I've also got to be able to listen to the athletes who I coach, and they've got to be able to listen to themselves. If they need a little bit of extra time, then they should tell me, and you should be honest with yourself. Actually, I'm not feeling like training right now. Give yourself that little bit of extra time before you jump back in.
Some of the things that you see and that we hear all the time is someone's gone to do a specific time or had a specific goal at a marathon. Say they want to break 4 hours or 5 hours or 3 hours, and then they don't do that, and they think, oh, what's the next marathon I can enter to try and do it? I know that's a mentality that a lot of people have, and even the elite end that happens as well. Some people go off way too fast and then they'll blow up.
Yeah.
How much time in between those two things would you give, or would you just completely write it off and then focus on one in the future?
It's a really good question, because this is something that happens quite regularly, as you can imagine. You get people who, for one reason or another, it's just gone wrong. The marathon is a totally different beast. It's not like a 5K when you can just rock up and go and do another one next week. It's not like we can go down to Battersea for a run through 5K and then there might be one in midweek and think, actually, I'll write that one off, I'll go again. Marathons aren't like that. Yeah. It's really tricky. If somebody's generally had a bit of a problem, so I'll give an example here. So one of the athletes we coach got food poisoning the 2 days out from the marathon, so it really affected their race performance. Now, because of that, they weren't able to run properly, and actually they backed out quite soon in the marathon. They still finished it, but they kind of ran the marathon. Now, the idea behind it then from a coaching perspective is, should they then go again in sort of 3 to 4 weeks time, because they're ready, they're in shape. And my thinking behind that is, if they are mentally okay with that, then yes, they are ready to go again. So rest and recover from what was pretty much a long run walk, and then make sure the body's good after that little bout of food poisoning and get back into a marathon a couple of weeks after. However, if you've run hard and it's just not gone according to plan and you've really hurt, I think you should then rest, recover, follow the same principles, but reflect and try and learn from your mistakes. What could you have done better? Why did it go wrong? Sometimes there's no answers. Sometimes you look at it and you'd be sat there all day. It can just go wrong. Happens to the elites, happens to anyone. But if you spend that time reflecting, then come up with a plan of, okay, well, what can I now do to look to the future to put those things right?
So it's not so much a case of like you fall off the horse, you get back on it. You've got to really plan when you're going to get back on that horse in a way.
I think so with a marathon. I think it's a lot different. I think temptation and human nature will want you to get back on that horse straight away. You're going to dive straight back into it. Come on, let's get back on the training. I'm in a good place here. I want to get back out there. I want to do myself justice. I did all that training, but you've not lost that training either. That training is in the bank. It's there, ready for the future, but then you've just got to be careful not to just want it too much.
Like some of the things that people do off the back of doing a marathon is potentially either use that fitness to then go and do a faster time in a shorter distance, or use it as like a marking point to then leap on to do an ultra.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, in the UK especially, we've got lots of options for ultra races, for fast 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. The two different things there, how would you approach it? If you were going shorter, how would you change your training? And if you were going to go longer, how would you adapt the training for the ultras and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, again, it's a really good point, because that tends to be the kind of two scenarios we see now. People who favour the shorter distances, they drop down to 5K, 10K, but people now are going longer, and they drop the intensity but go for more volume in the summer and go to trails, and that can be good for the body as well, because you come off the tarmac, you start running on the softer ground, it's really good. But again, I think for me, I like a plan, and I think people do respond well to a plan, so I think there should be some form of planning involved. So if it's a 5K, 10K, again, I would like to pick a target race or a couple of target races where, say, you look at the calendar and think, right, I've got that event there and I'm going to target that specific event, and that's maybe 8 to 10 weeks from now. And then from there, I might want to put a couple of races in the build up to that. But what are the things I'm now going to have to work on? Well, 5K and 10K is quite different to the marathon. Although it's still an aerobic event, you're going to have to train a little bit more of what we call in the VO2 max area, and velocity of VO2 max, which means you're pretty much training in around 5K, 10K race pace. Okay. which you may not have done a lot of, or you should have done some of in the marathon build-up, but you probably now want to start doing a little bit more of that as you go towards that. Whereas ultra runners are probably going to have to think, well, great, I've got the volume in the bank from the marathon, but I now may have to think about slowing some of that training down, so dropping the intensity and starting to go a little bit longer. Because if you're doing sort of 50 miles, 80 miles, 100 miles, then it comes a challenge of like time on feet, and the challenge is more how are you going to fuel properly. And some people do multi-stage ultras, which are over a couple of days, so lots to think about, lots of different ways to train, and I think it depends on the individual. But what I do think is I think it's really good for people to have different focuses at different times of the year.
And if you're someone who's just got into running, you've seen the marathons happening on TV or hear about friends doing it, that sort of stuff, what would you recommend for someone viewing this as say, for the first time and not done that? What would they do as a first steps to be able to think, I'm going to do a marathon in, is it 16 weeks or is it longer than that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you know, you see, well, I guess it's longer because things like the London Marathon ballot come out, but then there's events like Run Through that you can enter throughout the year, so it depends what situation you're in. What I would say to people is, you know what, take the first step, enter. Because what it does is it then gives you something to aim towards. So many people procrastinate, and by the time you've thought about it, it's gone, and then you've never ever done it. And I seen a statistic at the weekend, something like less than 1% of the global population actually complete a marathon, which is astonishing. Like, when you think about it, so just by completing a marathon, you become a 1%er. That's an amazing achievement. But so many people think about it, enter the ballot, and maybe don't get in the ballot for, say, London, because that's the biggest one. And then they think, oh, because I'm not in the ballot, I'm not going to do it. But there's some great marathons around the UK, around Europe, and there's marathons going all throughout the year. What I would say is, why just jump straight to the marathon though? Why not, if you think about a marathon, why not enter a half marathon first? Why not enter a 10K? Why not start off at parkrun? If you've never ran before, there's a great way to progress your running there up towards a marathon. And if you are going to do a marathon, that's going to be your first event. Give yourself the right amount of time. 16 weeks, if you're starting from nothing, is not a lot of time. I would say, you want to be looking at least 6 months, if not longer. It depends on what aspirations you have. But of course, just give yourself that time. You can never have enough time to train for a marathon.
Yeah, there's obviously, you want to be part of the running community and join that. There's lots of options to do it. Whereas if you are just seeing this for the first time on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and you think, I can do a marathon. But this is good information, because you're actually saying, do this stuff before HIIT.
Yeah.
Don't just jump in with that 16-week plan. Even if you are someone who's fit and healthy, it does take time to build up that confidence to be able to do it itself.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I guess one thing that we speak about a lot is those 16-week plans. I hate 16-week generic plans. That's why as a coaching company, we don't do generic. We set training plans for people now. It's an option that we have, but even those training plans have coach input, and they are based on people's lifestyle factors, their work, what their target is, and we have a coach checking in with them weekly to make sure they stay on track with that, even though it is a training plan. That's why we say it's more than a training plan. The reason I hate those 16-week plans, you'll see like 16-week beginner marathon plan, it's like they're taking somebody to nothing to a marathon in 16 weeks, and really the people who write that know that's not an ideal situation. So if people come to us and say, I'm thinking about a marathon in 16 weeks, well actually we might say to them, is that the right thing to do? Is that right for your long-term health? Why are you doing it? And I think you should always have a big why behind it. Look at why you're doing it, because that then helps you to shape a goal and shape your thinking. But it's just really important to think about, if you're going to do something like join the running community, then there's more than a marathon out there. You can do it in a number of different ways, and it's a really good way to build relationships, to be sociable, to get yourself fit and active, and it's really good for the mental health as well. Just get out there and keep yourself active.
So I think that's good information. I think that's really useful for people to see.
Thanks very much. Really nice to me.
But can you talk a bit about, so obviously New Levels Coaching, you founded this company. It's one of the largest running coach companies in the UK. Has multiple coaches covering different distances, different areas. What are some of the best things about New Levels Coaching? And if you're a beginner, brand new, you've entered a marathon in 16 weeks and you're panicking, is it okay to join New Levels Coaching? Are you going to find a way to get them to the start line, to be able to get them to the finish line? Or is it just for elite athletes?
It's a really good question at a really good point in time, because we're thinking about this a lot as a company right now. We're getting runners to tell us their why behind why they run, and it's got me thinking, what is our why at New Levels Coaching? Why did we set it up? We can tell people about the great benefits about coming to be coached by us, but really, why did we do it, and why should people join us at New Levels Coaching? We did it because we want to transform people's lives through running. Because that's what we did. I met you through running, it transformed my life. My friends, everybody I socialise with now is from that running community. It really did shape my life. And we want to do the same for people, but we want to do it at any level, because we know running can transform people's lives at any level. It's not about coaching people who are elite athletes. Yes, I do support elite athletes here in Loughborough, but we have a range of coaches who can help athletes of all abilities to go on and find their running potential. And we believe we can do that by transforming their life through running, whether that's physically, whether that's mentally, whether that's being part of a community. We want to build all those things into their lives to show them that actually you can travel the world, you can meet some fantastic people, you can go to these great race communities, and you can quite literally transform your thinking and the way you do things in your life through the power of running. And that is why we exist.
Hey, not bad that, is it? Motivated me anyway. So over the summertime, Lewis has also got, so I think I'm wearing one of the hoodies today that I got from his house because I spilled some yogurt on mine. It's the runner retreat. So what's the runner retreats and where they're going to be, and who's going to be there?
I think, again, if we look at the why behind it, this is but a lot of people don't know this about the brand, but you and I sat down and we said together, we want to be able to take people to inspirational locations, again, like we did as runners, and show them how to train more effectively and show them how to be better, not just with their training, but with their everyday life routines. And we came up with runner retreats in order to do that. And we had that vision, and now we're putting that into practice. We've got a trail camp coming up in May, which is brilliant. That's our first ever trail camp. That'll be led by James Tilley, who's a fantastic trail runner himself and head of Run Through Trails. And James is a very good marathon runner himself. He a very inspirational story as well. Lost 6 to 7 stone, got himself into running, stopped smoking, stopped drinking, and now runs 2:20 for the marathon, which is amazing. Incredible. So James will head that camp up. We're then off to Morzine for our European runners retreat up in the French Alps, and we're pretty much fully booked up for that now. In fact, we've got one room left for Morzine, so really looking forward to that. We're in the lakes later on in the year, that's October. We've got the performance retreat here in Loughborough in the summer. That performance retreat is an interesting one because it helps people look at their own performance but learn from elite athletes and the way that they do things, whereas the other retreats have a little bit of a different focus. They're focused around, again, transforming your life through running, but looking at everyday habits, rest, recovery, those sort of things that you can put into your plan. We also have one-day workshops, marathon workshop for the marathon runners out there. We're going to do another one at the latter part of the year this year. We're going to do that sort of November, December time. So that'll be good. And then we'll kick off again. I can't believe we're talking about 2024 already. But we'll be back in January with running technique workshops and marathon workshops in the new year. But yeah, lots going on. But what we want to do is we want to make it accessible for people of all abilities, don't we? We want to make sure that that running community can come to a safe space where they can enjoy expert coaching and learn from people as well, learn from the people who come, because we do get regular people coming along now. Yeah. It's a really nice community.
Hope you enjoyed that, guys. For more information on Lewis, check out the website newlevelscoaching.co.uk and also runnerretreats.com. For more information on Run Through, check out runthrough.co.uk, and also I'm Matt Woodywood at all the different channels.